Good evening. Good evening to everyone. I wish you could see you like I see you. Look around and see you. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful to have you all here in this safe and sacred space. It is certainly my privilege and honor to welcome you to this evening's 2017 Earl and Boswell Lecture. And we're delighted this evening you'll hear more to share this with the Center for Gay and Lesbian Studies of Pacific School of Religion, who sponsors the Boswell Lectures. And as you know, and I know, that this topic area could not be more appropriate for our time. My name is Linda Jaramillo, and I am a proud alum of Pacific School of Religion 2005. I also was privileged to serve on the Board of Trustees, and throughout this year have had the honor of serving as the chair of PSR's 150th Anniversary Committee. I wish that I could name every single person who's been involved in all of that. But when you do that, you risk leaving somebody out. So give a hand to all who have been involved all year in all of our activities. So I know some of you were able to attend the events of today, and some may be coming tomorrow, but I think for either today or tomorrow's events, I know you'll agree that's been phenomenal. The workshops, the discussions, they provided us not only relationship building, storytelling, but discussion that help us make a difference in our communities and all of our religious organizations concerning issues of immigration, race, religious liberty, sexual identity, sexual orientation, all of those intersections that make our lives whole. Those intersections that make our lives whole and bring wholeness to our being. And what better place than this place, Pacific School of Religion, that is a multi-denominational seminary and center for social justice that prepares spiritually rooted leaders to work for the well-being of all. It is good to be here this evening. I am also pleased to let you know that tomorrow we will be honoring some distinguished alumni of Pacific School of Religion. I am really impressed by this year's distinguished persons and recipients, and proud to have been journeying with them along the way. And I encourage all of us as alumni of Pacific School of Religion to take advantage of all the opportunities that are available to us, to have those reunions we've been yearning for, to have those conversations about what have you been doing and what are you going to do next, to engage and recharge the work that we're about and the work that we're called to do. Because I believe, and I know you'll agree with me, that we need to be about making a better world, because I believe that another world is indeed possible. Yes? Now, it is my distinct privilege to introduce the president of Pacific School of Religion, Reverend Dr. David Vasquez Levy.
Thank you, Linda, and a word of welcome and thanks. I add my word of welcome and thanks to all of you for gathering here tonight for this important conversation. We have indeed had already an incredible day, and look forward to our continued conversation both tonight and into tomorrow. It is a privilege to welcome you, especially into this space, on behalf of Zaytuna College that has opened their doors once again for us to gather and celebrate here. Zaytuna College is a partner with us here on Holy Hill, a gathering in this corner of Berkeley of 8 seminaries and centers, 11 centers that represent the breadth of religious traditions across the world. And this is the largest theological consortium in the world, nestled here in the middle of Berkeley, and an important place for the kinds of conversations that we are engaging about how we might identify ourselves, build a strong sense of identity, without relying on the need to exclude others in the process. We gather here in this place called Holy Hill because of its history of a place of thinking and engagement about the awareness that there are things that are holy, not necessarily holy as in completely pure and unadulterated, that if you get to know the place, no, that's not the case, but holy rather in the sense of sacred, important, human, fully human. We gather in this place with the awareness that we live at a time in which the holiness in each of us is not always recognized. And it is because of that that we must figure out ways in which our understanding of who we are, the stories that frame our understanding, the way we define ourselves, can be expounded and broadened. It is our conviction at Pacific School of Religion that this broadening of our understanding of self can grow out of the history and traditions we inherit within our sacred texts. Those texts must be engaged with a critical eye to the ways that they have been used not to broaden perspectives, but to narrow them. And yet, in spite of that awareness, or with that awareness rather, engage the text for the wisdom they bring to us at a time in which we need more than 140 characters to define who we are and what we are about. It is because of that a privilege to have Jose Antonio Vargas, whose career and path has been precisely in this telling of stories and the invitation to redefine what we understand ourselves as a people, as Americans, and as a part also of an emerging United States. I'm grateful also for the partnership with the National Council of Elders that have been a significant part of our preparation and planning for this conference, and we'll be hosting tomorrow a panel with the National Council of Elders, and that will take place tomorrow beginning at 8:45, and so we do invite you to return for that. I'd like to, again, express our appreciation for you being with us and look forward to our conversation tonight.
Thank you, David. What I didn't tell you is that I'm from the United Church of Christ, and we really love acronyms. As many of you do, I know, and I'm going to say it out loud. Thank you, David, and I would like to now call upon Justin Tanis, the Managing Director of the Center for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, and Questioning, and Gender Studies in Religion at Pacific School of Religion.
Good evening. On behalf of the staff of the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies in Religion, let me welcome you to tonight's lecture. Our mission at CLGS is to advance the well-being of lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, and transgender people, and to transform faith communities and the wider society. When we say that we are LGBTQ, we recognize that we includes immigrants, that we includes people of color, that we are young and we are old, and we are of every faith. Therefore, our work must include supporting immigrants, standing against racism, protecting the vulnerable, and ensuring that religion blesses us, not harms us. Advancing the well-being of LGBTQ people means standing with all of us. Each year, CLGS holds a lecture in the spring in honor of pioneering gay scholar John E. Boswell. We've joined forces this year with PSR's Earl Lectures to bring you this conference so that we might more effectively address together this vital issue for our time. At the Boswell Lectures, we highlight the work of groundbreaking scholars and advocates. And we're delighted to join with the Earl Lectures to welcome Jose Antonio Vargas to be a part of those rich traditions. And now to tell you more about our speaker, I'm proud to introduce PSR student, Ms. Coke Tani.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, what a blessing and challenge and treat we are in for tonight. My name is Coke Tani, and as Justin said, I'm a Master's of Divinity student at PSR. Tonight, I am super honored to introduce our keynote speaker to you. And I want to say that thanks to the API, or Asian Pacific Islander Roundtable of PSR's Center for Lesbian and Gay Studies, some of us here were able, and we were profoundly blessed to share lunchtime with Jose Antonio. He's a prophet of our times whose sacred wisdom comes from a place that has been and is deeply embodied, sacrificed, investigated, and lived. He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, filmmaker, and media entrepreneur whose work centers on the changing American identity. He is the founder and CEO of Define American, a nonprofit media and cultural organization that seeks to elevate the conversation around immigration and citizenship in America. And he's the founder of Emerging Us, or hashtag Emerging US, a media startup that lives at the intersection of race, immigration, and identity in a multicultural America. In 2011, the New York Times Magazine published a groundbreaking essay he wrote, in which he revealed and chronicled his life in America as an undocumented immigrant. A year later, he appeared on the cover of Time magazine worldwide with fellow undocumented immigrants as part of a follow-up cover story he wrote. He then produced and directed Documented, a documentary feature film on his undocumented experience. It world premiered at the AFI Docs Film Festival in Washington, D.C. in 2013, and was released theatrically and broadcast on CNN in 2014, and received a 2015 NAACP Image Award nomination for Outstanding Documentary. Documented is now available on various digital formats. In July 2015, MTV aired, as part of its Look Different campaign, White People, an Emmy-nominated television special Jose Antonio produced and directed on what it means to be young and white in contemporary America. As a journalist, he has covered a variety of topics, including tech and video game culture, HIV and AIDS in the nation's capital, the 2008 presidential campaign for the Washington Post, and he was part of the team that won a Pulitzer Prize for covering the Virginia Tech massacre. He has appeared on an array of television programs, including Good Morning America, The O'Reilly Factor, Real Time with Bill Maher, The Colbert Report, Univision's Aquí y Ahora, the Filipino channels Balitang America, and more. Jose Antonio, or what I want to say, it's Pepeton. We from the API Roundtable and all of us here are fully behind, beneath, and with you tonight, our beloved brother. Please join me in welcoming the 2017 Earl Boswell keynote, Jose Antonio Vargas.
Oh. Please sit. You just made me more nervous. It's really a privilege to be here tonight. It's a homecoming of sorts for me. Before I continue, I'd really like to recognize and extend my gratitude to a few people. Reverend Ryan Eller, my friend Ryan. Ryan, can you just wave for a second? There he is at the back. Ryan is the executive director of Define American, which is an organization that I founded with some friends 6 years ago. And Ryan, Reverend Eller, has been for me a real spiritual guide in the past 4 years now of doing this work. I have another friend I'm going to embarrass. She totally doesn't know I'm doing this. Elise Haas. Elise, can you stand up? I'm so sorry, Elise. Elise sits on the governing board of Define American, and I remember one of the first Facebook messages you ever sent me, quote, "Please let me know if I can be helpful in any way and know how many people are standing behind and with you." You have given more than enough meaning to that, so thank you. Thank you for being here. And the Reverend Dr. David Vasquez Levy, the president of the Pacific School of Religion. Thank you. Last fall, I received this letter attaching an email from the Reverend Vasquez Levy. The letter begun thus. It said, shortly after ending his second term as President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt delivered the 1911 Earl Lectures at Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley. Under the title of Realizable Ideals, Roosevelt powerfully stated that, quote, all our extraordinary material development, our wonderful industrial growth, will go for nothing unless with that growth goes hand in hand the moral, the spiritual growth that will enable us to use aright the other as an instrument. Those words remain true today, this letter said, particularly as the unprecedented level of mobility and connection across the world demands visionary leadership. I am writing to invite you to deliver, I still don't know how to pronounce this word, the sesquicentennial Earl Lectures at Pacific School of Religion. This was the letter. And then I had learned that the lecture had been given by the likes of Dr. Maya Angelou and Elie Wiesel, who gave the lecture in 1981, the year I was born. Actually, Elie Wiesel is very personal to us because when you go to defineamerican.com, which I know you will, there's a campaign called Words Matter, and the prophetic essential words of this man, that no human being is illegal, anchors one of our signature campaigns. This lecture has been given by President Roosevelt, the same President Roosevelt who assumed the presidency in 1901, the same year that this lectures was founded. And 1901 being the middle of the Philippine-American War, when the Filipinos fought for their freedom from the Americans. You know, I have to tell you, and any immigrant in this room, and unless you're a Native American or an African American who was brought here through slavery, right, you can relate, that arguably the most loaded, confusing, dangerous, necessary question you can ever ask an immigrant is, where are you from? Where are you from? Right? You know, in shorthand, when I get asked these questions, and I get asked these questions in all places, in front of Republicans, Tea Party members, progressives, liberals, everyone, in shorthand, I am here, millions of Filipinos like me are here, legally or illegally, undocumented and undocumented, because of the Philippine-American War, the beginning of a centuries-long relationship between the Philippines and the United States. Now, in February 1899, 2 years before this lectures was founded, the British writer Rudyard Kipling wrote a poem entitled The White Man's Burden. I don't know if you've heard of this poem. In this poem, Kipling urged the United States to take up the burden of empire, as had Britain and other European nations. This poem was published in February 1899 in the issue of McClure's magazine, and it coincided with the beginning of the Philippine-American War and the United States Senate's ratification of the treaty that placed Puerto Rico, Guam, Cuba, and the Philippines under American control. At that time, Theodore Roosevelt, soon to become vice president, then president, copied the poem and sent it to his friend, Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, commenting in the poem that this was rather poor poetry, but good sense from the expansion point of view. Apparently, Theodore Roosevelt wanted a window to the Orient, and the Philippines was the window. Now, I had known about White Man's Burden. I did not know, however, that in the writing of this, that the subtitle of the poem was White Man's Burden, the United States and the Philippine Islands. I did not know that when the poem says, take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen peoples shall weigh your gods and you. The sullen people, who, by the way, in the poem are called later on half devil and half child, were us, the Filipinos. I did not know that. Now, I don't know if you know Filipinos, but we're not sullen people. And the reality is, what gets lost in all the incendiary, often insipid, sometimes insolent rhetoric around immigration is the reality that we are here because you were there. Beyond the simplistic notion of the American dream and the opportunities that are indeed here, we are here, the immigrants that come to the US because the United States had done something economically and politically to our countries. And now, 106 years after President Roosevelt gave his Earl lecture, I am proud that an undocumented gay Filipino who looks Asian, has a Hispanic name, and who majored in political science and African American studies is giving the 2017 Earl lecture during a conference called Borders and Identity. I sincerely hope wherever President Roosevelt is, up in heaven, that he is smiling. The truth is, my identities transcend conservative or liberal, Republican or Democrat binaries, in the same way that my existence, that our existence, are not limited by borders or laws. The reality is, as I stand here tonight, I cannot help but address the borders within my identities, the places where I am welcomed and the places where I am excluded, because I look like this, or because I don't have papers, or because I use fake fraudulent papers and therefore deemed as a criminal, or because my sexuality is somehow a threat to other people's sexuality, as if all I am is how I have sex and whom I choose to love. You know, religion, I have to say in this room, is a painful, pained, torturous topic for me. Belonging to a church, which means to me belonging to a community of people, has always been a constant, perpetual struggle. I came to this country at the age of 12. My mother sent me here to live with her parents, my grandparents, both of whom were naturalized citizens. Now, getting me here legally was not possible. According to immigration laws, my grandparents couldn't petition me because the relationship is not close enough. So my grandfather found a way to get me here, and he smuggled me. But as a 12-year-old, I didn't know what smuggling meant. All I would know later on was that my grandfather, who made $6.50 an hour as a security guard, saved up $4,500 to get me here. Now, I didn't know that the papers that he bought with those $4,500 were fake until I went to the DMV to get a driver's license. Now, around that same time that I found out that I was here illegally, I also realized, because of AOL chat rooms, you know AOL chat rooms? That's when I realized that I was gay. And you know, it was hard. It was hard being in the closet about both of these things. And I remember one late night in my room and being on the phone with somebody I met online. And I could hear that my grandmother had picked up the other side of the phone. I could hear her breathing, and I said, "Lola," that's grandmother in Tagalog, "put the phone down." I put the phone down, and we lived in a very small house. She still lives in that house. Outside of my room, next to the heater, before the bathroom, my Lola, my grandmother, looks at me and said, "You're gonna go to hell." For us as Filipinos, you know, being Catholic is a birthright, right? That's what we do. Religion for me was something that I had just inherited, like my name, right? Jose Antonio Vargas from the Spanish. Being baptized, being confirmed, going to church on Easter and going to Christmas, that's what we're supposed to do. I didn't really examine it any further, nor did I feel welcomed by my grandparents, who somehow saw my existence as something to be ashamed of. Because, you know, gay. I have to say that around this time, I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't discovered this thing called journalism. And I fell for it for the pure, simple reason that when you write a news story, I don't know if you know this, you get a thing called a byline. by Jose Antonio Vargas. So I thought this is my first front page story for the Mountain View Voice. There was a fire down the street. And I remember seeing my name on the paper, and all I could think was, wait a second, if I can't be here because I don't have the right papers, what if my name is on the paper? Doesn't that mean I exist? I'm writing in English, I'm interviewing Americans, doesn't that mean I'm here? Now, my grandmother saw this front page article and screamed out loud, "What are you doing? You're supposed to hide." I said, no. Journalism from the very beginning was a form of rebellion. From the very beginning, journalism for me was a form of existence, was a way to contribute, was a way to resist and rebel on whatever circumstances I was dealing with. And I did this because I thought in my head, if I got hired at the New York Times or the Washington Post, if I wrote for the New Yorker, because people think the New Yorker is a good thing, if I covered a presidential campaign, if I win a Pulitzer or something, maybe I would do enough so I could be enough. So I could be, earn my citizenship, which is what everybody always tells people like me. Earn it, right? So I thought I would do all of this, and I'd done all of it, and then nothing happened. So by the time I was about to turn 30, about 6 years ago this year, I had to make up my mind about what to do. I spoke to 27 lawyers, because I'm a good reporter. All of them said, well, what do you mean you want to come out as undocumented? You can't do that. And the more they said no, the more I said, well, isn't that the most horrible photo you've ever seen? On the cover of the New York Times Sunday magazine, in a 4,000-word essay against the advice of all of the lawyers, I admitted to being in this country illegally, committing all the fraud I had to commit just so I could stay and I could work. I had outed not just myself, but with their permission, I outed my high school principal, Pat Hyland, who took care of me. I outed the guy in the Washington Post who hid my secret. And I exposed, as a good journalist is supposed to do, just how broken, inane, and outdated this immigration system is. Now, for me, part of the reason that I came out was not only to tell the truth, but to put a name, a face, and to complicate the narrative to who, quote unquote, the illegal is. Part of this as well, especially among my colleagues in the news industry, is to present, facts. At Define American, we have a Facts Matter campaign that we have now issued a challenge to the entire news industry. When you walk out of here tonight, I hope you pick this up. About 2 weeks ago, we published a one-page fact sheet, a sheet of 6 irrefutable facts that are independently sourced, that every journalist who report on the issue of immigration must use and know before they talk about the issue any further. Now, these facts don't simply fit in your tweets. It's not just something that you can post on Facebook, although you can go to our website and you can download the whole thing and you can give it to your friends and colleagues and coworkers. But these facts strike against the alternative factual reality that President Trump and his supporters have presented when it comes to this issue. The fact that immigrants commit less crime than the native-born population. Right. The fact that immigrants pay an estimated $11 billion in state and local taxes every year. The fact that we have paid collectively in the past decade $100 billion into the Social Security Fund, undocumented workers. The fact that a border wall would be an ineffective immigration restriction, considering the fact that 40% of the people here illegally overstayed their visas and did not cross a border. And the fact that the fastest growing undocumented population in America are Asian immigrants, not Latinos and certainly not Mexicans. The fact that you cannot talk about the country's undocumented population without including undocumented Black and undocumented white and Asian immigrants in this country. Today we celebrate St. Patrick's Day at a time when there are an estimated 50,000 undocumented Irish people in this country. Now these are, facts. But in addition to presenting the facts, at Define American, we insist on telling stories, especially the coming out process of other undocumented immigrants. I don't know if you remember this photo, this magazine cover. The first magazine cover I ever bought was Ellen DeGeneres on the cover of Time magazine. I bought it at Walgreens in San Antonio and Mountain View. And I remember buying the magazine and then going home and hiding it in the closet because I didn't want my grandparents to see it. All I could think of was Ellen when Define American managed to put 32 undocumented young people on the cover of Time magazine almost 5 years ago. And this cover represents the diversity and the complexity of the issue that the mainstream media and the entertainment media fail to recognize. The reality is we cannot change the politics of an issue unless we change the culture in which people talk about the issue. That was the case with LGBTQ rights, and that will be proved to be the case with immigrant rights. The truth is, while immigration reform is a moral crisis for 11 million undocumented immigrants and the millions more who make up our families and friends, immigrant rights is largely viewed as a political partisan issue by the media, both the news media and entertainment media, and the public that consumes all kinds of media. In this country, politics is culture. You cannot change the politics of an issue unless you change the culture in which people talk about the issue. As a proud gay man, I am proud to live in a country where being anti-gay and anti-trans, anti-lesbian, hopefully it's getting better and better. It's unacceptable to be openly homophobic these days, thankfully. All the work that has gone to make that happen. But in this country, we live in a country in which being anti-immigrant is not only acceptable, it lands you to the White House. How do we change the culture around that? For us at Define American, storytelling is a correction, an intervention, and a liberation. For us, telling the stories and coming out as undocumented has been a central part in resisting not only what is happening now, but what has happened during the Obama administration when President Obama deported more than 3 million immigrants, more than any other president in the history of this country, and especially now as we live through this regime. I'm about to show you a video that I'm incredibly proud of at Define American. We produced it 2 years ago. We filmed this video on the steps of the City Hall in San Francisco, and the voice that you hear is Harvey Milks.
I'm coming out to show that we are your neighbors, your coworkers, your classmates, and your friends.
I'm coming out because I refuse to stand on the sidelines while others accomplish change.
I am coming out for my son so that we can be safe and together.
I'm coming out now because the person that is me cannot be defined by a piece of paper.
We must destroy the myths once and for all, shatter them. You must tell your friends if indeed they are your friends. You must tell your neighbors. You must tell the people you work with. You must tell the people in the stores you shop in. We must continue to speak out. And most importantly, we must come out.
Coming out takes many forms, but it always requires courage.
It's time. It's time for all of us.
Employers, employees,
Teachers,
students, families,
neighbors,
Americans,
Allies, to overcome shame,
to overcome fear,
to document and define ourselves.
We are coming out to be seen for who we are, not only as undocumented immigrants, but as Americans. Come out. Join us at defineamerican.com. Now, that was 2 years ago, before President or then candidate Trump declared his candidacy. And coming out now has real consequences for more of us. I'm sure you heard about a young woman in Mississippi who participated in a press conference to talk about her undocumented status and was then arrested right afterwards by ICE. I'm sure you heard about a woman who was in a hospital with a brain tumor when ICE showed up to lock her up. I'm sure you heard about the grandmother of 5 who was detained and arrested in front of her grandchildren. Now, as an undocumented person, life under Trump, in this Trump era, is very, very different. After the election, I have a lot of lawyers, which is a privilege, and God bless lawyers. A lot of my advisors told me to not fly anymore. At Define American, we're really proud that we have done more than 800 events in 48 states and visited 370 college campuses in the past 6 years. My lawyer said, no more flying, not even within California, just drive everywhere. I would move out of your apartment because people shouldn't have an address that they can look up so that they can pick you up. One of my lawyers, possibly the most radical in the best way, suggested that, hey, Jose, what about Canada? She thought that my moving to Canada would be a statement of strength, of a proactive response, and saying, if you don't want us here, we'll go to Canada. And maybe, my lawyer said, we should contact the Prime Minister of Canada and try to figure out what he can do and his government can do to welcome people who feel unwelcome in America. I would be lying to you if I did not consider all of these things, especially now that I've publicly said them in a lecture. And then on top of all of this, I got an email from Nancy Pelosi's chief of staff inviting me to be one of Democratic leader Pelosi's guests for the State of the Union, or the joint address of President Trump. Then I got to get really serious about, wait a second, so you want me to show up in public inside the House chamber at the Capitol while President Trump is speaking? Congresswoman Pelosi knew what she was asking, and she and I had already met before. I'm proud to have lived in her district while I was a student at San Francisco State. I knew what she was asking, and she knew what she was asking. My lawyer said, don't do it. A lot of my team members at Define American said, I don't know if this is worth the risk. Then I thought, and I remembered meeting John Lewis for the first time, Congressman John Lewis, who I met in an event 4 years ago. I introduced myself, and he said, oh, I know who you are. It looks like you got yourself in some good, necessary trouble. And the words of Congressman Lewis kept ringing in my ear as I tried to make this decision. And I decided, in the spirit of every American in this country who have always felt rejected and challenged by America, to show up. And not only was I going to show up, I would publish an essay in the Washington Post that night that I would be showing up. And that the Washington Post would headline it, Trump could deport me, that's why I'm at a speech in Congress. Now, I wrote this essay, and underneath this headline, to me, is a better headline of the reality that undocumented immigrants show up every day all around this country. I'm going to read to you this passage from the essay. I decided to show up tonight because that's what immigrants, undocumented and documented immigrants, do. We show up. Despite the obvious risks and palpable fear, we show up to work, to school, to church, to our communities in big cities and rural towns. We show up and we participate. This joint session of Congress is a quintessential American moment at a critical juncture in our history. I am honored to attend and remind our elected leaders and everyone watching that immigration, at its core, is about families and love. The sacrifices of our families and the love that we feel for a country we consider our home, although it labels us aliens. We show up even though we're unwanted, even when most Americans don't understand the push factors of migration and why we come here in the first place. We show up even though many Americans, especially white Americans with their own immigrant backgrounds, can't seem to see the common threads between why we show up and why they showed up at a time when showing up did not require visas and the Border Patrol had yet to be established. Now, my presence that night inside that Capitol building in front of President Trump was among the everyday acts of resistance that we are witnessing across this country. There are the undocumented workers showing up in industries that depend on our labor, including the more than 100 workers nationwide who lost their jobs while participating in the Day Without Immigrant protests. The undocumented students showing up in high school classrooms and college campuses in places that have made it clear illegals are not wanted there. Now, I'm sure you heard of this undocumented woman, Jeanette Visguera, a mother of four who has found sanctuary inside the First Unitarian Church in Denver. In an interview, she said, quote, "Supposedly, I am a criminal because I drove without a license, because I had expired stickers on my car, because I had false documents to work and put food on the table for my children." Now, Jeanette actually came to the United States in 1997. That was about 4 years after I got to this country. She worked as a janitor and a union organizer, and she later owned a moving and cleaning business. Yes, undocumented immigrants like me actually own businesses and employ people. In 2009, she was caught with a fake identification that her lawyer said she had acquired in order to work. The same fake documents that people like me and I myself had to get so I could work. She pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor, setting off a chain of events that led to the deportation order. And instead of going to ICE, she decided to go to the basement of this church. Yesterday, because of the event tonight, Ryan and I actually went to visit her in Denver. And I have to tell you, it was a rather intense experience visiting her. That's her grandson, Santiago, who was born in this country. I don't know if you know this, but in this country right now, 4.5 million US citizen children have at least one parent who's undocumented. We live in an America in which about 5,000 US citizen children live in foster care because both parents have gotten deported. So we met her at this church at the basement, wanted to say hi, wanted to know how it was like to live inside this church. And I told her that I'm about to speak here in front of all of you at this prestigious school tonight. And I asked her to deliver a message. What should I tell all of you from her? She said that what I will tell them is that as faith leaders, they have a moral responsibility to protect their communities and their congregations. She said they can't just be talking about helping your neighbor when in actuality they don't. She said that yes, we are all Americans. We live in the American continent. We are not Europeans, we are not French, we are Americans. In my case, I am Mexican. This was part of my country. I am in my land. I am where I need to be. You know, I had to tell you, sitting in that church basement, listening to her, as Santiago, the grandson, roamed around, I had to really question my own relationship with the church. And the churches all throughout this country that has been housing immigrants, documented and undocumented. I remember meeting a young undocumented woman in Dalton, Georgia, an hour away from Atlanta. And she said, I got to this country 5-6 years ago from Central America. I thought white people hated us. And then when I got to Dalton and I went to church, all these white people started hugging me. I didn't know they liked us. She said it was the first time she ever hugged a white person who was inside a church. I met this young man who is a US citizen, but whose mother is undocumented in Providence, Rhode Island, right after the election. He spoke up in front of all of his classmates and he said, I am more scared than my mom, and I don't understand it. I mean, I have my papers, but my mom doesn't have my papers, and she tells me not to worry. And when the son would ask the mom, why aren't you so worried, Mom? His mother told him, Mijo, son, God has been hiding me for 20 years. God will continue to hide me. What can churches and places of worship do? How will the clergy all across this country lead? How will congregations provide sanctuary in all possible ways? You know, this morning Ryan had a workshop during this conference and talking to people about what congregations can do. And he shared that number one, share stories, storytelling. of faith of congregants that immigrated recently and many, many years ago, right? The second thing is figure out, how can you be a sanctuary? How does that work? What are the loopholes? What are the logistical issues involved? And the third thing he said, which I will share with you tonight, is expanding our understanding that immigration is a global issue. What does it mean to be a citizen of the kingdom of God when national citizenship is not possible? Where do the 244 million migrants around the world, 244 million migrants around the world, we don't know how many of them are undocumented or unauthorized, we don't know. I am one of those 244 million people. What are our rights? Where can we go? Where do we find, quote unquote, sanctuary? And as Jeanette was talking, I couldn't help but think about Ellis Island. And of course, I couldn't help, as a journalist and as an undocumented journalist, and as someone who's been perpetually in love and at the same time confused by this country, to ask this important question that rarely really gets unpacked, which is, why do people move? What does U.S. foreign policy and trade agreements have to do with migration patterns? In other words, what role does the United States play economically, politically in this chain of migration? Right? And why is it that when white people move, it's manifest destiny? It's courageous. It's white man's burden. Why is it that when people of color move, it's a question of legality? Is it legal? Is it a crime? And while I believe that countries must define and defend its borders, I believe that, I think we ought to examine, why is it that goods and commodities travel more easily than people? Why is it that while my mother waits in a 16-year waiting list to come from the Philippines to see her son, me, we haven't seen each other for 24 years this August. Why is it that while my mother waits to come here legally, and while I can't leave, because if I leave, they won't let me back, why is it that this iPhone can be manufactured in China, delivered in Cupertino, and end up in New York where I bought it? How is it that corporations and commodities and things can travel more easily than people? And since we are talking about legality, I think we must be mindful of the fact that legality has always been a construct of power. Lynching, segregation, violently taking indigenous land, and many more atrocities were, quote unquote, legal. Barring women from voting was the law of the land. Jim Crow was the law of the land. There was a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act that barred all Chinese laborers, skilled and unskilled, from immigrating to the U.S. for 10 years. You mean the same Chinese that built the railroads with the Irish? Now, did you know that it wasn't until the Naturalization Act of 1790 that we established our first citizenship law? And according to this act, applicants had to be a free white person of good moral character to apply. Did you know that it wasn't until 1924, when the Citizenship Indian Act was passed, that Native Americans could actually become U.S. citizens? Let me repeat. Native Americans could not legally become U.S. citizens until 1924. Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, once told me that in many ways Black Lives Matter is a conversation about citizenship, not citizenship papers, not citizenship laws, because haven't we passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act? Aren't there laws protecting black people and all the other things that are supposed to protect all of us? When really the Black Lives Matter conversation is a citizenship conversation about dignity, right? Now, my existence was not and is not defined by legality. My existence was made possible, is made possible, by people who didn't need papers or pieces of laws to treat me like a human being. In all these conversations about church preparing for this lecture, I've been thinking about what religion really means to me and who constitutes and what constitutes a church. And then I started thinking of people like Mrs. Denny. She was the choir teacher. She was the first adult I ever told that I was here illegally. She wanted the choir for our spring tour to go to Japan. And I told her that I couldn't. And she's like, no, you're gonna go. I'm like, no, Mrs. Denny, I don't have the right passport. No, we'll get you the right passport. No, Mrs. Denny, I don't have the right passport. She finally got it. Then the next day, she actually told the whole class that we were gonna go to Hawaii instead, because she didn't want to leave any of her students behind. Mind you, my classmates didn't know that the only reason they didn't go to Japan was because of me. There's actually someone in this room who worked very closely with Mrs. Denny. I'm about to embarrass him. His name is Art Whipple. I always called him Mr. Whipple. Mr. Whipple, can you stand up? I'm sorry to embarrass you. So, a part of my church is Mr. Whipple and Mrs. Whipple. I can't call them by their first name. It seems really disrespectful. I did not find out then, but I found out later that the people who always paid for my choir trips, because my grandparents couldn't afford it, were the Whipples. Because that's what they did, right? But guess what? That's how our schools function all across this country. Of people like Whipple stepping up and realizing we have to fill in where the gaps are. I am here because you're a part of that church, Mr. Whipple. I think of this man, Peter Pearl, who really put his job on the line. When I got hired at the Washington Post, right after college, I was mortified. And I figured, I gotta go tell somebody, right? So I decided, because Peter Pearl would always buy me free Starbucks, that I would tell him. So over an overpriced caramel macchiato, I sat him down in a park, and I told him everything. I told him about the fake driver's license, the fake green card, the fake papers, all the lies. I told him all of it. I expected him to go, okay, we have to go see the HR people now. Instead, Peter Pearl said two things. One, you make so much more sense now. Because I guess I was always walking around like a ball of worry all the time. Second thing he said, don't tell anybody else. Just keep going. So when I was assigned to Sarah Palin's campaign to cover her, when I had to fill in for a reporter who was covering Hillary Clinton and get on a plane with Hillary Clinton, when I ended up winning a part of this Pulitzer Prize, and I'm thinking, wait a second, aren't they going to know that the Social Security number is fake? When I kept getting promoted and the Washington Post is wondering, hey, do you want to be a White House correspondent? Peter Pearl was the person I always went to, and he said, don't worry, just keep going. When I came out, I told him that I don't need to name him at all. I said, I'm just going to say there's this person who helped me out. And he said, oh, no, I'm proud of what I did. I would do it again. And you know, I wonder how many Peter Pearls are there all across this country, right? And then there's this woman, Marcia Davis. I don't know how this happened, but in my career in journalism, I was trained very early on by black female journalists. I don't know how it happened. I just kept attracting them. And this woman, Marcia, has just been my heart. When I told her that, hey, Marcia, I think I'm gonna go to Canada. She's like, what are you talking about? I think I'm gonna go to Canada, but you're home. When I told Marcia that, hey, you know, I don't think this whole showing up at the Capitol building in front of President Trump during the joint address is a good idea. Marcia says, Jose, what do you mean? Shouldn't you be happy and proud to be sitting there representing not only yourself, but any other person who's ever been called a criminal in this country? So I went. As far as I'm concerned, Mrs. Denny, Peter Pearl, Marcia Davis, these people, Mr. Whipple, are all a part of my church. A community of people who shows up every day for people like me. Now, the question before us then is, how are you showing up for us? What does allyship and intersectionality, these terms that we use, what do they really mean and what do they look like? Since we are in this church, in this glorious church, the question now becomes, how do you church? Who is included at church? And then I wonder, well, who makes up a church? people. People who make up laws and people who delineate and define borders. Who make up church all across this country are everyday people grappling with their identities, always. And in this church, they find a community. And in this church, they find resistance. And in this church, they feel welcome. All across this country. When I was in high school, grappling with being, quote unquote, an illegal faggot, because I would hear people all the time call people like me illegal and people like me a faggot. A lighting guide became a man named James Baldwin, who I read when I was a freshman in high school. Notes of a Native Son was the first book I ever read by Baldwin. And in that book, he actually wrote that you have to decide who you are and force the world to deal with you, not its idea of you. And you know, after reading that book, I ended up reading another book called The Fire Next Time. The epigraph of the book, I was reminded, was this quote from Kipling. Yes, the very first time I saw the quote from The White Man's Burden was while reading a James Baldwin book. And you know, since we are speaking about burden, I am here as one immigrant telling all of you that we are not your burden. I am not your burden. You don't need to free me. Because whether or not you like it, this is a marriage, you and I. I am you. I am you. And if you don't realize that, then those very words that Baldwin wrote in that glorious prophetic book, right? Everything now we must assume, Baldwin wrote, is in our hands. We don't have any reason to assume otherwise. And now we, the relatively conscious whites and blacks and Latinos and Asians, if we do not falter in our duty now, we may be able, handful that we are, to end this racial nightmare and change the history of the world. But if we do not dare everything, the fulfillment of that prophecy recreated in the Bible by songs by former slaves is upon us. God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water. Fire next time. I would argue that preventing that fire, stopping that fire, must begin here at church. It is an honor to be with you tonight. Thank you. Oh, sit. Thank you. Hold on. Say hi. All right. There's a mic. Please sit down. Thank you. We have questions, and as you walk out, by the way, tonight, there's the one-page fact sheet that would make for a really good icebreaker at work and with your relatives and friends. Please pick it up. Questions, please.
Thank you. As you make your way up to the microphone, reminder to please remember what a question sounds like. And encourage you to make those as you prepare and come forward. I want to give a word of thanks, Jose, for an incredible and powerful, inspirational conversation and for a challenge and invitation to us. It was Jose who was called a criminal, who finally helped a pharaoh to understand that his Egyptian dream depended on the life of that dreamer that lingered in his jail. It was also a mother who gave her child into the waters, letting him go, unsure if she would ever see him again. That Jochebed allowed Moses to be what a friend called the first mojado, the first wetback, to cross a river against the law that divided its poverty and oppression on one side of the river from the wealth he saw on the other side. It was Shifra and Pua who, like the gentleman you recognize tonight, did what they knew was right in spite of what the law may have said, and saved those babies. So it is the fact that every Sunday we read these stories of immigrants that you have inspired us to return to them and read them anew, to read them with you in mind and with those in mind who shape and show up every day in our nation. So thank you for an inspirational word. So I didn't mean to scare you. We would like to have some questions, so please come on up to the microphone. I was hoping by the time I was done we would have somebody there.
I'm in Berkeley, aren't I? Please, or else you're gonna make me nervous. Yes, hi.
Well, if no one else will take the question then. So my question is about the conflicting importances of truth-telling and the responsibility for the personal protection of the people whose truths are being told. I'm thinking in particular of an organization I lead that works with LGBT refugees in a region where it is not safe to be known as LGBT, and we must tell their stories to Americans to inspire support for them.
Yes.
And of course, that's very complicated. So I want to hear from you, is an anonymized story as powerful?
Oh, yeah.
Or how else can we navigate that without forcing our beneficiaries to out themselves?
I'm so happy you asked this question. As somebody who's had to come out of 2 closets, and I'm totally done, I have nothing more to share with you. I am a firm believer of not forcing anyone to come out until they're ready to come out, right? That process, now mind you, I spent all of my 20s, from 16 to 30 years old, the only people that knew that I was here illegally were 8 people. I don't know, it's not like I'm shy. I don't know how I managed to not tell anyone else for like 14 years. And a lot of it had to do, I think, with all the lies I had to tell myself about, oh, you know, they're not gonna come after me, or oh, I'm the good immigrant. I had internalized this idea of having, quote unquote, a good immigrant. So we don't do that. At Define American, we're very, very clear, because if you go to our website, you actually see we have the largest collection of immigrant stories, documented and undocumented online, right? And we are very vigilant about making sure that no one feels forced, that if people only feel comfortable sharing a first name or a last name or whatever, that they do that. I'm proud that one of the jobs that we've done now is we've become a source for journalists who are looking for people, right? But you, as the person directly impacted, have the human right to define your own narrative and tell your own story. Who gets to tell whose story is as important as what the story is itself, in my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Hi.
Hi, Jose Antonio. It's an honor to be here tonight and to have the opportunity to hear you talk. A lot of my friends couldn't come tonight, so I'm here on their behalf. I have a really broad, general question.
Oh, sure.
In terms of American identity, for me, when I think about it, immediately what comes to mind is white supremacy, cultural genocide, writing a paper right now about dismantling of bilingual education and what we have right now with dual immersion, gentrification. It just, things are such a mess. I don't see it as something to embrace. I personally don't embrace it. Being white is so central to who I am. It's like inescapable, but why do you choose to embrace and resignify American? Is there some other alternative you considered, or why do you do that? It's very bold and courageous. So.
Well, that's a loaded question. By the way, what kind of white are you? Do you know?
Well, that's a really interesting question. You got me there. I honestly, if I went out with a girl, right? And she goes, she's Latinx, and she kept asking me, like, you know, what kind of white I am, and I'm like, honestly, like, I'm white. I think it's a trip to actually, like, even try and attempt to say I'm something, because I think it, you know, obscures the reality that I'm white, and that's, you know.
But wait a second, but white is not a country. Right. So, like, Irish, Italian, Russian, are Russian? Yeah.
My first ancestor, as far as I know, was 1663 in New Netherlands, French patent on the Hackensack. I have a French last name, but it's another side of the family.
I remember Baldwin. I was watching this, you know, if you want to go on YouTube, by the way, you should just check out all these clips. And of course, the film is still out there. But there's a quote, Baldwin, I remember how confused I was by the statement. Baldwin looked at the camera and said, I am only black if you think you're white. And I was like, what does that mean? What? Because, you know, I would argue that in this country, so much of what defines America is that black and white binary. Although the reality is, white people are not white, and black people are not purely black, given the history in this country. We don't have to talk about Thomas Jefferson and what they did, right? It's like we have always been a mixture in that way, right? I have to say, by the way, that I think American identity to me, the very complexity that conjures, the fact that people were other things before they became white, given that today is St. Patrick's Day, there's a book called How the Irish Became White that I think is such an essential read. Unpacking that to me is so important. And frankly, for us right now, I get really disillusioned with my conservative friends, and I do have conservative friends, and get disillusioned by my white progressive friends who want nothing to do with conservative white people. Oh, thank you. I get disillusioned by it because I'm like thinking, wait a second. So as a person of color who has to figure out how to dismantle and survive a system I did not create, now, not only do I have to take care of this, now I have to take care of you too. So can all those progressive white people who hate conservative white people just go all talk to each other? Because I actually think that responsibility to me is of utmost importance right now. Even unpacking and embracing in all of its ugly messiness what white even means is necessary. To me right now, especially at a time like this, in which whenever I say, you know, I made a documentary called White People, I mean, as you can imagine, the hate mail after that was just like, how dare you illegal alien faggot make a film and call it White People? I didn't realize until I traveled all across this country that for many white people, just calling them white people is already a trigger, right? Like people of color are so used to being racialized, but white people just get to be American, right? So complicating that to me is so important, especially now. And I hope, by the way, that, are you a student here?
Yes.
I hope, by the way, that maybe you want to go out with a conservative white girl, you know? Hey, why not, right? I hope that you talk to people who don't agree with you. I hope more than ever that we challenge ourselves to get out of our bubbles, right?
So my bubble would be going to see white conservative people.
What was that?
My bubble would be going to see white conservative people. Like that would be, like, I mean, yeah, going to see white conservative people. Like that's.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what you're saying.
Like, I need to go see white conservative.
Oh no, I'm just saying what the conversations are around that. You know, look, I am not a fan of Milo. I'm sorry, I'm about to bring him up. I think Milo is like Ann Coulter. I think they play really good roles. I want to give them awards.
Right.
But I'm intrigued, and I have been, and we've been pushing ourselves to talk to people who go to those talks to try to understand where that's coming from. And maybe this is the journalist in me. Like I've always had to inquire about why people think what they think I've always been very curious about that. And I think white identity as it stands and how white people, progressive, liberal, conservative, deal with that is such an important conversation that I don't think we have of enough in this country.
I've seen white people, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for answering my question.
okay, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that last part. What did you just say again?
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for taking the time to.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, this is a kind of a personal question, but what do you draw upon for your, I mean, you've displayed incredible courage. What is your source of courage and what renews you?
That's what happens when you come to the seminary.
You know, I really don't see it as courage. I don't. I think citizenship for me, since I can't have it, my lawyers told me that the fact that I lied about being a U.S. citizen, committed fraud by lying to be a U.S. citizen, may be the very reason why I will never become a U.S. citizen. You can't lie about being a U.S. citizen. It's like apparently the largest offense you can make under immigration law. And I lied, kept lying. So for me, citizenship means, how do I exist outside of myself? How do I justify the space that I occupy and the voice that I have to know that the world does not revolve around me? How do I know, right? How do we insist on the reality that our equalities are tied to one another? So what I'm doing, to me, in some ways, is only an extension of what I've always done, except now it's public. And with that, you know, it's kind of lonely because people make assumptions about things, and you're not progressive enough, you're not radical enough, you don't use the right term, you know, all of that, right? Progressive people are really hard on other progressive people. I don't know, we all need a hug or something. I don't know what's happening. It's like this oppression Olympic calling out culture thing in which people are out radicalizing each other. I don't know where this happened. Courage to me means you have a choice, right? Maya Angelou used to say that out of all the virtues, courage is the most important because it's the only thing that allows you to practice all the other virtues. But for me, it's not courage because it wasn't a choice. This was the only thing to do. It was either I do this or I self-deport. And I'm not about to do that. So, but thank you. Yes, sir.
All right. So I'm a pastor of a local Methodist church, and I'm supposedly having some impact on the spiritual formation of people. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking...
Wait a second. Spiritual formation. Yeah. Can you define that?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Take a mirror, look in it, and you're looking like spiritual formation to me. It's the inward character that changes the outward world. And you have had a Okay, I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. You're having a tremendous impact by being truly who you are with full integrity and authenticity. What my question is to you is, I mean, you've already introduced me to some people in your church. What were the formative experiences that you had that contributed to who you are today?
Jeez. Well, Mr. Whipple, you met him, is over there. You know, I am a product of generosity of people. All those people that paid, literally and figuratively. But I think when I think about how I got to be this way, I think of the impact of all the books that I read, all the movies I saw that define American for me. And then I think of the small acts of kindness, little small acts of kindness, that made me feel not just seen and felt, but made me feel validated, right? I think this idea of, which is, the biblical idea of treating each other like you treat yourself, right? I guess I've always lived by that because I've always experienced that. And I believe that when you find gratitude, you find purpose. I am very grateful. I am who I am because of this country, because of the way it challenged me, because of the way it continues to challenge me, by the way it continues to limit me, and the way that it continues to tell me what I can't do. In many ways, I think this country is a challenge to all of us. And I think that has become clearer and clearer for me. And then again, I don't want to drag Baldwin into this one more time, but I remember one time I was listening. Please, by the way, call your congresspeople and remind them that we cannot cut PBS. Yes. We cannot cut PBS. I was watching an interview of Bill Moyers and Toni Morrison. And Toni Morrison was asked by Bill Moyers, what is the metaphor for your work? And Toni Morrison says, love. And she quoted Baldwin. I didn't realize they were friends. And Toni Morrison said, you've already been bought and paid for. Your ancestors, your grandparents, your parents, they already gave it up for you. It's already done. Now you can love yourself. It's possible. So I think all of that has been paid, and all my gratitude for all that has been paid, if that is what you call spiritual formation, then awesome. I just hope that Mrs. Furman from 7th grade, that Mrs. Gable from the Mountain View Public Library, who had to explain to me that Mike Nichols and Sidney Lumet were two different directors, that Miss Marcia Davis and Peter Pearl and Art Whipple and all of these people, including my grandmother, I hope that they know how thankful I am for all of that sacrifice. So, thank you. Thank you again for having me here.
And I apologize. We will not be able to take more questions. Jose Antonio,
I have to
again,
fly.
thank you very much, but you do have to catch a flight.
Wish me luck at the TSA line. But
exactly. So safe travels as you go, and we will see you back tomorrow. So he's
Yes.
just heading for another presentation, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you. If you would permit me just a few more minutes as we conclude our time to express our appreciation to Jose Antonio and to the Fine American for the partnership for tonight. A seminary is the word for a bed of seeds, a place where things are planted in the hope that they will be transplanted elsewhere and bloom. It is that work which you have experienced tonight, our hope, that seeds we are planting in our conversations today will be taken into the communities you represent, that you will encourage your faith communities, your social clubs, your families to engage in this important and critical conversation. We are grateful for your being with us. Let me say a couple of words about our day tomorrow and encourage you, if you have not yet signed up, to come and join us again. Tomorrow morning, we will join with the National Council of Elders, and Queen Kim from KQED will engage them in a conversation about the first 100 days of the Trump administration to take the long view about how we sustain the work of change from their perspective and to invite us to think creatively about how we respond in our moment. We will have a couple more workshops, recognize our alumni in a lunch tomorrow, but then we will gather at 3 p.m. when Jose Antonio will be back to join us for an action downtown Berkeley at MLK Park, the Martin Luther King Jr. Park, calling for sanctuary for all communities. We will stand in solidarity with the city of Berkeley and other cities that have declared sanctuary, and also invite us in conversation with a variety of speakers to think about ways we call on our elected officials to ensure the sanctuary can be created for all, regardless of their country of origin, their race, their religious tradition, and their gender identity. We will conclude our conference tomorrow with that action. Tonight, we invite you to join us yet for a reception we will have across the street back on the campus of PSR at the Badet Museum. If we all make it over there, it may be a little tight, which will be great. We can just come in and grab some food, and there's a beautiful courtyard we can all hang out in, so it would be great to have an opportunity to continue. And for our alums and students, we will have a Cocoa Bar at 9 p.m. in Deltramont, so please join us for that as well. Again, thank you for your attention tonight and for your engagement, and may you have a great evening.